Egypt, the land of the pharaohs, is one of the longest inhabited places in the world. This is why the land has yielded many fascinating archaeological discoveries. However, a recent discovery by scientists near the pyramids is a 3,500-year-old box containing a secret. What secret does this ancient box contain? Are we inviting trouble by opening the box? In this video, we bring you the top new insane archaeological discoveries made in Egypt, including a 3,500-year-old box next to the pyramids that contained a super secret. According to historians, Egypt began to be inhabited as far back as the 4th millennium BCE. The North African land holds lots of fascination to archaeologists because much of its history has been lost to time. The ancient Egyptians depended on the River Nile, with many of them working as farmers. However, in time, a long list of pharaohs ruled over the land and are responsible for most of ancient Egypt's achievements, including the world-famous pyramids. One of such pharaohs is Thutmose II, whose tomb for many centuries was thought to be lost. However, a treasure chest amazingly discovered recently promises to show the way to the eternal resting place of the king, and the most amazing part is that the old box was discovered by accident. The old box was discovered by a team of archaeologists attached to Poland's Warsaw University's Institute of Archaeology. The archaeologists unearthed the precious box at the Deir el-Bahari site in Egypt on the banks of the Nile. The location is not far from the famous sites of Luxor and Karnak. Deir el-Bahari is a massive complex of royal tombs and other monuments, including the famed mortuary tomb of Hatshepsut. It is interesting that Polish teams have been working in this area since the 1960s. As we mentioned, this box was discovered purely by chance. It was found among some debris. In fact, the box looked just like another block that was used in ancient times for building. The scientists said they had to look at the box more than once to be sure of their find. This stone chest is about 40 centimeters high and wide. However, the treasure lying inside is worth a fortune. What could a 3,500-year-old box in Egypt contain? The scientists were eager to know the content of the box too, and what they found inside the box left them gaping. The box contains several items that are wrapped carefully in linen. One of them contains the remains of a goose, which researchers speculate was offered as a sacrifice for a religious purpose. The second wrapped item contains what must have been a goose egg, while the third item was an ibis egg. The ibis bird was a revered animal in ancient Egypt. This informed the scientists that the wrapped items must be highly symbolic. But what the archaeologists found next was the star of the show, as it was like a missing piece of a puzzle. There was another bundle covered in linen lying next to the stone casket, which of course was explored. Inside they found a small but well-preserved wooden box. In shape, the box looked like an ancient Egyptian mortuary chapel and was one of the main pieces of evidence that they were dealing with items connected to royalty. The box contained the name of Pharaoh Thutmose II. Inside the old wooden box were symbolic items that further connected the site to the dead Egyptian monarch. But they also prove that a temple or tomb was being constructed in the name of Thutmose II. Of course, when pharaohs died, they were often buried in grand style, no expense spared, with pyramids being built around their eternal resting places. Moreover, the site where this discovery was made in Deir el-Bahari was in the middle of the royal cemetery. The most exciting thing for the scientists was the possibility of locating the long-lost burial place of the king. But who exactly was Thutmose II? Pharaoh Thutmose II had one of the shortest reigns among the monarchs of Egypt. He was king for only 3 years, from 1476 to 1479 BCE, before dying at the age of 16. King Thutmose II married his own sister Hatshepsut. Did you say, ooh? Well, marrying within the family was not strange to the Egyptian royalty. They often did this to preserve political power within the family. However, it appears the sister was the sole beneficiary of the power passed down to their generation. Thutmose was apparently a figurehead and never really ruled. Hatshepsut dominated her husband and would go on to become the first female ruler of Egypt. She is regarded as one of the greatest and most powerful rulers ever to sit on the Egyptian throne. With items indicating Thutmose II was buried nearby, the archaeologists began to look for the king's tomb nearby. However, there has been no success yet in the search. Perhaps they have to dig further, or the king's remains had been moved to another site at a point in the past. However, if they succeed in unearthing Thutmose II's grave, it will be one of the most significant finds of the Egyptian royalty of the century. It could be as dramatic as the discovery of the tomb of another boy king, Tutankhamun, whose resting place contained a lot of mind-blowing treasures. Will Thutmose II's grave remain untouched when found? Archaeologists hope so, as there is so much to learn from such a find about the customs and ways of life of the ancient Egyptians. Now, the Egyptians were known for mummifying some of their dead. In fact, scientists have been impressed by the level of preservation of the bodies they unearthed today, and they have to give credit to these professional embalmers. But how exactly did mummification work thousands of years before modern preservation techniques arrived? Another fascinating find by archaeologists shed light on the way the dead were preserved in ancient Egypt. The finding was made at the vast Saqqara necropolis near the ancient city of Memphis. While many people today would rather avoid the topic of death, the findings at this mummification workshop are yielding lots of historical facts we can ever hope to get. In fact, the finding was ranked among the top 10 archaeological discoveries of the year. Memphis was the first capital city of Egypt, so it is not surprising that a burial service, often rendered to royalty, would be discovered there, and the city's necropolis is home to many temples and tombs. According to the archaeologists from the University of Tübingen, the site also yielded a new burial chamber at the bottom of a communal burial shaft that is 30 meters deep. They had already found 5 burial chambers, but after more than a year of excavation and documentation, the mission discovered the 6th burial chamber hidden behind a 2,600-year-old stone wall. Mustafa Waziri, Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, mentioned that the newly discovered chamber housed 4 wooden coffins, but was in a poor state of preservation. One of the coffins bears the remains of a woman named Didi Bastet. One of the things that puzzled the researchers was the unusual way she was buried. The embalming custom in ancient Egypt was to preserve the deceased organs, including the lungs, stomach, intestines, and heart, in 4 different jars. This was done under the protection of the 4 gods known as the 4 sons of Horus. However, the site revealed Didi Bastet had 2 extra jars, making a total of 6. The mission investigated the content of Didi Bastet's 2 extra jars using computerized tomography or a CT scan. Pending further analysis of the images, the scientists conclude the 2 jars contain more human tissue. Based on this result, there is a possibility that Didi Bastet was given a special form of mummification that preserved 6 organs of her body. The mission is currently conducting a thorough study of the images in order to identify these 2 extra organs. Further examination of the texts found at the mummification workshop site on the coffins and sarcophagi revealed the class of people buried there. The mission revealed that priests and priestesses of a mysterious snake goddess known as Nehut were also laid to rest there. It appears the custom was to bury the priests of Nehut together. They also concluded that Nehut became a prominent goddess during the 26th dynasty. At least 1 priestess and 1 priest of Nehut found in the chamber were naturalized Egyptians. Their names, Aput and Chanimit, were common to the Libyan community that settled in Egypt during the 22nd dynasty. That is perfectly reasonable, as ancient Egypt was a multicultural society that took in immigrants from different parts of the ancient world, including Greeks, Libyans, and Phoenicians, among others. What we find interesting here is that the tests conducted at this site were completely non-invasive. This means the artifacts were not destroyed or degraded. For example, they used a method known as X-ray fluorescence on the gilded silver mask that was discovered on the face of the mummy of a priestess of the goddess Nehut. This test revealed the purity of the mask's silver at 99.07%, notably higher than sterling silver at 93.5%. This gilded silver mask is the first discovered in Egypt since 1939 and the 3rd such mask ever to be found in Egypt. This discovery gives us a clue as to the chemical components of the liquids used by the ancient embalmers. This means the process could one day be recreated just as it was done millennia ago. A team from the University of Tübingen, the University of Munich, and the Egyptian National Research Center in Cairo did the chemical testing on the residue of oils and resins preserved in cups, bowls, and pots found in the mummification workshop. Early results show that the mummification recipe contained substances like bitumen or tar, cedar oil, cedar resin, pistachio resin, beeswax, animal fat, and possibly olive oil and juniper oil. While we know that the people of ancient Egypt died, it would be morbidly fascinating to know what type of diseases led to their demise. Thanks to the discovery of a site that has been known as the Valley of the Golden Mummies, we now have a fuller picture of what death and dying was like in ancient Egypt. This was the discovery made after the excavation at Bahariya Oasis, led by Dr. Zahi Hawass. The site yielded a total of 105 mummies and was a spectacular find at the time of the discovery. For one, it contained perfectly preserved mummies, not disturbed by grave robbers, allowing scientists to glean many possible details from them. The mummies also dated back to the Greco-Roman times and contained the mummies of people from different social statuses. Some of the mummies were lavishly gilded from the head to the chest region, much like the mummy of Tutankhamun. The lead archaeologist estimates that there may be up to 10,000 mummies on the site, and it would take more than 50 years to excavate. The team of Hawass stayed about 2 months at the site as there was so much to dig up. The tombs found here had many different architectural styles. You could see the shapes of the Ankh sign and the popular cross. Some of the tombs were cut into the rock. One tomb, the largest yet found in the valley, was a family burial place and contained remains from multiple generations of the same family. It warehoused 42 mummies. The tomb has 4 different sections, an entrance on the north leading to stairs, a small room for delivery of the mummy before being put in chosen place for burial, a burial hall in a rectangular shape, and 7 niches for burials. One of the mummies belongs to a lady wearing a golden mask with a cobra depiction on her forehead. Her chest was covered with cartonnage painted yellow with the 4 sons of Horus. Another mummy was wrapped in linen with geometric designs and placed in a wooden coffin. She had a stele made of wood at her feet representing the eternal gate of the deceased. She wore a Roman dress common during the time of her death. Other details found at this site showed that burial was done in pottery coffins, an anthropoid coffin, and a mud brick mastaba. But the most fascinating fact is the many different styles of mummies that were observed. There are mummies completely covered with linen and cartonnage colored from head to foot, mummies covered with linen with a mask of gypsum placed on the face, mummies with masks of gold with scenes of the gods, and mummies covered only with linen without cartonnage or masks. The researchers also found offerings given to the dead on religious occasions. This included wine, dates, figs, beans, olives, and more. The deceased were also lavished with everyday items for their use in the afterlife. This includes jewelry, statues, and coins. The coins are made of bronze and were placed in the hand of the deceased to give as payment to the ferryman who will transfer the deceased into the afterlife. So what could have killed these people? The researchers brought an X-ray machine to the site and carried out some post-mortem. The tests revealed some of the deceased were afflicted with diseases common today, including cancer. However, there was evidence that the people buried here were rich and could afford to be extravagantly buried. Hawass predicted that they made their money from the wine trade, as Bahariya was known for excellent wine back in the day. Only 6 of the mummies have been removed for further studies. Hawass believes the rest should be left undisturbed at their eternal resting place. There are plans to restore the tombs and add new ceilings. The Egyptians were elaborate when it came to the burial of the dead, especially when the deceased was prominent during their lifetime. This is why many of the amazing discoveries made in the North African country were connected with the burial practices of the dead. Take, for example, the Khufu ship, which was discovered in the 50s, was recently relocated amid much pomp and glory. The discovery of the Khufu ship was sensational, as it had spent about 5,000 years buried under the ground. Scientists were amazed by both the construction technique and the level of preservation of the ship. The ship was unearthed on the southern side of the Great Pyramid of Cheops. It all started when the Egyptian engineer Kamal al-Malak was cleaning and removing the rubble on the site, not knowing the kind of treasure lying under his feet. He uncovered 2 pits for 2 ships that were covered with blocks of fine limestone. Malak then realized that the Great Pyramid of Cheops has 3 other holes carved in the natural rock of the Giza Plateau, taking the form of boats on the eastern side of the pyramid. 2 of them are located on the southern and northern sides of the mortuary temple, while the 3rd hole is located north of the road to the Great Pyramid of Cheops. After it was dug up, the boat was handed to Egyptian restorer Haj Ahmed Youssef. The measurements of the Khufu boat include a length of 43.4 meters, a maximum width of 5.9 meters, and a depth of 1.78 meters. It has a papyrus-shaped bow that is 6 meters high and a stern 7 meters in height. The ship has 10 oars with 5 on each side, and their lengths range between 6.5 and 8.5 meters. There is a main cabin in addition to the captain's cabin at the front of the boat. The rudder is 2 large oars, and the boat weighs about 45 tons. And in a feat that impresses shipbuilders of today, the Khufu ship did not contain a single metal nail. The ship was held together with ropes. But what was the function of this elaborate funeral boat? It was used to transport the king's mummy to visit the holy sites of the god Osiris, including Abydos in the south and Boto in the north. It was also used to move the body of the dead king from his palace of residence to the cemetery where his pyramid is located. However, the ship is believed to serve in the afterlife as well. Named the Solar Boat and the Ship of Khufu, it was known that such funerary ships sailed to restore life for the deceased king from the holy places where the ships of the gods reside. According to Egyptian mythology, the sun rises on the far eastern shore, which is when Ra, the sun god, appears from the water and is greeted by a band of monkeys. Following this, Ra takes a ride in his day ship, which sails him across the sky until evening, when he transfers from his day ship to the night ship that waits for him in the underworld. The Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities recently transferred the Khufu ship to a new display site at the Grand Egyptian Museum. It took 6 months of workshops and consultations to agree on the scientific method that would ensure the prize ship was undamaged during its transportation, and it was more than worth it as the Khufu ship is a national treasure. Let's hear what you find most fascinating from ancient Egypt in the comments section below.